This is a sketch of the life history of Clifford Stratton Sr., taken on June 30th, June 29th, at the Stratton family reunion in Winslow, Arizona. And he's talking to his son Clifford James Stratton. His early years.
I was born in the town of Hinckley, Utah on August the 31st, 1914. And we lived in the old house. Was 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, living room, in which there was a nice fireplace, and with conventional outdoor plumbing. We had a well that was right near the house, and that well was a flowing well. We had it cut down to about 2 gallons to the minute, and water flowed in that constantly, and leaving us plenty of water for our stock, and always the best, coolest drinking water that you can imagine. We also had a cooler rigged up there in the corner of the house that opened through a window into the kitchen, and Mother could reach inside of that cooler and get milk and butter and everything right there, right through this window that we had taken out and put some doors on. And it was just an evaporative type cooler, screen frame, and with a big pan on top, and gunny sacks hanging down the side that would siphon the water out of the pan down along the side of the cooler, and kept everything just right for drinking and eating. I don't remember too much about my early life, except I do recall that at our home, Mother always had a big row of cosmos that came from the front of the house out to the front gate, and we had a big lawn that went around 3 sides of our house, the front and back both sides. And our house, instead of being set north and south, it was set southeast and northwest, so that we faced the corner of our lot. And we had a big garden in behind, and what I call a big garden. It was about a half acre. We had currant bushes back there with 3 chicken coops back along the north side of it, and 2 of them were chicken coops and 1 was a brooder house. But my father always tried to keep about 400 laying hens all the time, and we had pigs, and when I was about 11 or 12 years old, we got over the Union Pacific Railroad, which runs about 7 miles east of my hometown. Changed out a lot of ties, and we got a lot of ties. We took wagons and we'd go over and load them up, and it was a day's trip over there to get a load of ties and come back and unload them. But they gave us these ties. We used them in the construction of a milking shed for our cattle, for our cows, and also a shed for our horses. Dad always kept about, we had 11 stalls in there, and he tried to always keep those enough fresh cows around that we were always milking 11 cows. And the cows knew their own stall. We would just open the gate, and they'd go right into their own stall, and that's where we would feed them. And I had 3 brothers and a sister living at this time, and we would, my 3 brothers and I had certain cows that we milked every morning and every evening, whether we were playing ball or regardless of what was happening at school or anywhere else. I don't care what time you came home, those cows were still waiting for you to go milk them. And I grew up pretty much in my teenage years. I grew up during what's now known as the Great Depression, and the Depression never really hurt us very much because my father had been very astute, if you want to say it that way, and he had 320 acres of land. We had been running around 600 acres. My 3 brothers, and my sister's husband, Clayton C. Cahoon, and my father and myself, we had been running around 600 acres. Not all of it was paid for. Father could see this depression coming on, and he paid out all the land that he could pay out. So it happened that we didn't owe any money. We had our home paid for. We had 320 acres of our best land, and we had our water rights paid for. So all we had was taxes and assessments to pay. And so the Depression never hurt us too much. The farms never failed us. We always were able to have plenty of food on the table. We raised and provided almost all of our own food. Very little did we buy at the store. And we would trade. We had relatives down in southern Utah, Dixieland, and each year they would come up with at first it was wagons, and then later it was trucks. They would come up with wagon loads or truckloads of fruit, and my father would have that already traded for grain and various products of that type. And they called themselves, in those days they were known as fruit peddlers. They would bring their come up in our country up into northwestern or central western Utah and peddle their fruit, and they would sell it or trade it for anything that they could get, and but they always went home with their trucks loaded with grain and with flour in exchange for their fruit. And so we had, I've often said that we were the fattest naked people in the country. cash was awful hard to get a hold of, and money to buy clothing with was a little hard to come with, but we always had plenty to eat. As I grew up, my older brothers were very active in athletics at the high school, and as I came along, I joined with them, and then my younger brother Clayton. So there's 4 Stratton brothers that were, for 3 or 4 years, we were the third baseman, the shortstop, the first baseman, and the pitcher on the Hinckley baseball team. I hurt my arm playing third base, and my senior year in high school, and my first year in college, I learned how to catch, and my arm got well, and from just returning that ball back to the pitcher, my arm got well, and so from then on it was pitcher and catcher and first baseman and shortstop that the Stratton family provided for the baseball teams around. Hinckley and Delta went together for a Hinckley Delta Athletic Association, and we played in the state playoffs twice. I never was able to go to the state playoffs. I played for them all summer, and each fall, the 2 years that the team went into state playoffs, I was off at college. So I never had the good fortune to go to the state playoffs with our baseball team. And in high school, by the end of my freshman year, I was playing regular guard on the football team. And as a sophomore, I started out at guard and moved over to tackle, where I played the rest of my sophomore year and junior year. And then my senior year, I moved back to fullback. When I went off to college, I played, my first year in college was at Branch Agricultural College at Cedar City. I had a Scholastic scholarship down there for I won that because of my scholastic ability, and so I went down there to play ball and go to school. And the first semester, I had plenty of money. Everything was going fine, and I was planning on going into medicine. I wanted to be a surgeon. In those days, you were either a general practitioner or you were a surgeon. There wasn't all the specialists that we have nowadays. And I wanted to be a surgeon. My first year in college, though I was at a junior college, I took courses that would prepare me for medical education. But the Depression hit real bad, and all the banks closed between Thanksgiving and Christmas time, and I didn't have didn't have any money to go back to school with. So my brother and I and two other boys that were Tobe Adams and Woody Woods, who were all on the basketball team, we went back and we badged. And that's how we made it through the rest of that, my freshman year. I played football and played guard on the football team, and played basketball and also baseball. And during this, while I was playing, we were playing Riverside Junior College from California, and I was playing guard. I was fairly good sized, weighed around 200, 205 pounds, and the lightest man that Riverside had on their team was 218 pounds. And I remember one play came over me, and they couldn't take me out, and here all I could see was a whole big bunch of feet and legs. I just reached up and gathered in all that I could gather, stopped the play, and I don't recall any more of that game until I woke up on the sideline. But it seems that I was able to, after that play, even though I was knocked out, I was still on my feet. And we had a play that where the quarterback faked to the right and then ran with the ball to the left, and I was to come out of the line and take out the end and open way for him. It was strictly fake. There was no power to it at all. And I failed to come out of the line. And quarterback asked me where was I on that play, and wasn't quite in this language, but anyway, he wanted to know where I was on that play, and I said I was playing football. And he took one look at me and took time out and called the coach out. The coach, and he told the coach that I didn't know which end was up. And the coach took one look at my eyes and he asked me which was our goalpost. And I said, I didn't care which was our goalpost. We were just playing football. Let's get at it. And he took me out. I woke up. I was laying on the bench, laying on the grass in front of the bench, and I was looking up, and all I could see was a sea of faces all up in the bleachers. They were all looking down there, wondering if I was dead or something, I guess. But anyway, when I came out of it, and the doctor was there with me, and they ran me around there a little bit to see if I was all right. Went back into the ball game. But I had a lot of fun in athletics in high school and college. I was a 4-year letterman in high school, 4-year letterman in college and in football. Played in the old border conference for Flagstaff, Arizona State Teachers College. My last 2 years played as a halfback for them. And in high school in basketball, I as a sophomore, I made the team, but I was a splitter guard. I guarded the end of the bench and gathered up all the splinters. And but as a junior, but that year was the only year that Hinckley ever won the state tournament. we won the state tournament in basketball. A little old town with of about 1,500 people, and we won the state championship. My older brother, Warren Rock, as he was known in those days, was a regular forward on that team, and I was the last sub on the bench on that same team, and he was 2 years ahead of me in high school. And in college, I was a 4-year letterman in basketball, and we won the Rocky Mountain Conference when I was playing for Cedar City, the Rocky Mountain Junior College Conference. The next year, I was at Dixie College playing at St. George, and we won the Rocky Mountain Junior College Championship again. And then I went from Cedar City to St. George. Then my third year in college, I was at Flagstaff. Those moves, and I played for Flagstaff. Those moves were necessities because of the money situation. As I said earlier, we had all we could eat, but we had no money, and for me to go to college was quite a sacrifice on the part of everyone in the family, and I had to make my own way, really. And I was offered a better job down at Dixie College than I had at Cedar City, and that's the reason I moved down there. And after I had finished at Dixie College, which at that time was a junior college, I went to Flagstaff, Arizona, to Arizona State Teachers College, because of I could make my own way. They gave me a job, and my first job was for them at Flagstaff. I was working in the dining room and working in the kitchen. In the first 2 or 3 days, I was a pearl diver, and then Mother Hanley, who ran the dining hall and the kitchen, she promoted me to making ice cream, until one day a fellow student by the name of Hartzell Carnegie and I got some maraschino cherries out of the kitchen, and we had all the help and everybody down eating ice cream. And Mother Hanley caught us, and I was demoted. I went back to peeling potatoes again for about a couple of weeks. Then I went back to making ice cream again. But the second quarter, in those days it was quarters instead of semesters. The second quarter, I was hired by the president of the college, President Tommy. He was writing a book on Indian lure of the Northwest, and my second quarter in college was one of the best jobs I ever had, for working for Dr. Tommy. I was able to go into the part of the library that is under lock and key. I had to have special permission to go back into this one section where all of the old books were, and my job for him was doing research. I would find out, well, little things. Why does an Indian Navajo Hogan always face to the east, and why is it always eight-sided, and why the custom of when you walk in the door of a hogan, you always stepped to the right and stood there until you were addressed by one member of the family who was the reigning patriarch in there at that time, who happened to be in the teepee. And just things of that nature, that was what I was trying to find out. And on Saturdays and Sundays, when I wasn't off on a football or basketball trip or baseball trip, why, I would take the school car and go out on the reservation, which is only just a few miles out of Flagstaff. In fact, it's 46 miles out to Cameron, where I would usually start out from there. The Indian trader out there was got to be a good friend of mine, and he introduced me to different Indian families, and I was able to go talk to them, and he gave me a lot of valuable help, and I gained quite a bit of information for Dr. Talmadge's book. And when the spring semester, spring quarter, we had Dr. Risselman was head of the math department, and he asked me to be his assistant. And that paid me $50 a month. Boardroom and access to the laundry room, boardroom and laundry, cost us $37.50 a month, and I was making $50 a month as an assistant to Dr. Risselman on the spring quarter of my junior year, and I taught analytical geometry to freshmen, and that's how I made it through school that year. The next year, when I came back, since I was majoring in business education and was heavy in accounting, why Dean Bellwood, dean of the college, was head of the business department, and I taught as his assistant all year. I taught beginning accounting. I'd go at 8 o'clock in the morning and teach. I was his assistant. If he didn't show up, I taught the course. And it just happened that after the first day, I taught the course all the way through. And the same was true of the math department. I taught analytical geometry all the way through. And that's how I got the money necessary to put myself through college. To return to my early years, my earliest recollections, one of the first things that I recall as a child was being caught on the back of a mad hog. We used to butcher our own hogs, and we drove this hog right up underneath the scaffold, and my father and my older brothers did, and the neighbor man who was helping us. And I was standing on the doubletree of a wagon, and my father took .22 and shot the hog, and he hit him a little too high in the head, and didn't kill him. And that hog just started to squealing and opened its mouth and was just running blind, and it ran right underneath the tongue of the wagon that I was standing on up on the doubletree, and I fell off and fell right on that hog's back. And to this day I can recall that I was the most frightened that I've ever been in all my life. I rode that hog probably about 10 feet is all before I finally fell off. The hog didn't even know I was around, really. He was just, crazed from that bullet hole in his head. But that really frightened me. And I also recall we had a neighbor woman, a widow woman named Debs, would come over to the United States from Switzerland, and her husband had been deported back to Switzerland the year before, and she was living in the house that my father had for rent. He had built a couple of apartment houses for college, for students who were at Millard Academy, which was a church-owned school there in the town, and she had taken over one of these apartments. And I recall my first taste of blood pudding. Mrs. Debs was over there one day as we were killing a hog, and she asked us to save the blood, which of course we did. And later on in the day, she came back over to the house with a pudding, and she didn't say what it was. And oh man, we've been working hard, as we always did around the farm there, and I really enjoyed a dish of that pudding until after it was all done, why, she said what it was. It was blood pudding, and it was really good tasting until I knew what it was, and I walked out by the cellar out in the backyard, and that's where I lost that pudding. I recall we would stack our hay in front of, we always had a big haystack in front of where we kept our milk cows and our horses, in front of this barn I was talking about earlier. And we would just pull the hay out of the stack, and eventually, before the year was over, you'd just get the sloping from one end where you could walk right up the stack, clear up to the highest part. And one day a bunch of us kids were playing out there, and my brother Clayton, that 2 years younger than myself, we got to tickling him and rolling him down this sloping part of the stack, and he had an accident, and it made him angry, and he picked up a neck yoke, and here he came charging up that stack. Well, of course, we all blew the coop right then and there, and he got me cornered on the very highest part of the stack, which is about 14 foot high, and he was swinging that neck yoke at me, and there was only one place for me to go, and that was over the side. And I did. I saw a little pile of hay down there, but it wasn't as high as I thought it was, much of it as I thought it was. And I ended up with a quite severely sprained ankle. Well, needless to say, Clayton and I and all of our friends, the McCurdy kids, we were in trouble because I was a sprained ankle, and my father didn't. He was quite strict on us children doing any fighting. My father, as I first recall him, he was bishop about the time that I first recall. He was bishop for 13 and a half years in the Hinckley ward, and this was all during my teenage years. And he was president of the drainage board for several years. He was a county commissioner for a while, and was always very active in the affairs of the town. At one time, he was mayor of the town, and Dad was what you would class in those days as a successful farmer. Until the Depression came on, why, we did real well. Money problems were not too many, and we were fairly prosperous. Of course, the Depression put everybody on an equal basis as far as prosperity was concerned. We were all looking for something to eat and a place to sleep. My father, as father of the ward, which a bishop was at that time, was considered father of the ward, and we could never depend on Dad to stay with us on a job all day. If we went out to cut hay, we always put him on a team and on a piece of equipment that wasn't absolutely necessary, because we would no more than get started working until somebody would drive up to the fence and honk, and my father would go over there, and that's where we would find his team at noon. We would take his team in and feed the animals, and we always had to work around him because of his many activities. But he was a tireless worker and a hard worker. Always, he had, sometime in his youth, he had broken his left arm, and it never straightened. It had never healed quite properly, and it always had a little crook in it. But even with that handicap, he would work right alongside of the best men around, and he taught us kids how to work, not only from example, but by seeing to it that we did work. And it was hard on the farm. We got up early and we worked hard all day, but my father was very kind to us kids too. We'd get in a day's work every day, but when it came time to go practice baseball in the evening, or go somewhere to play basketball or football or something with our school teams and so forth, he was always on the sideline cheering us on, and he always saw to it that we had time to be there. And many times we would come home off a trip, we'd just be completely worn out, and we'd find that all of our chores were done and everything, that Dad had gone out and done all the chores. He always backed us kids in everything that we did. And we used to have lots of fun. We would go hunting quite a bit. There were lots of deer in Utah at that time, and one of our greatest sports, one of the things that we looked forward to the most was in the fall, was to go out deer hunting. Usually this would last 2 to 3 days. There were so many deer that at that time that if you were into the second day before you had your deer, why, you were considered a mighty poor hunter. And so usually we'd have our deer in camp the first day, and then we'd just camp out for a couple of more days before we would come home. And many of my fondest memories are of our various hunting trips. We grew up had guns around all the time. I recall my first gun was a .22 Special. My father bought it for me when I was about 11, maybe 12 years old. They passed a law in the state of Utah that put a $7.50 a head bounty on coyotes. And coyotes were very plentiful, in fact too much so is the reason for the bounty. And we had a screened-in porch across our back of our house, and that's where we stored our guns. Each one of us, men folks in the family, had our own gun, and it was just a habit with us when we would start out for one of the fields or to go do some work on some fence or something. It was just a part of our life to pick up our gun as we went out the back door and carry it with us. And quite often we would kill a coyote, which 7.5 was a good little chunk of money in the days when you worked for $2.50 and $3 a day as a threshing hand. And we
tell about your grandma now, the pudding she used to make, and some things that she liked to say and do with you kids.
My memories of my mother, she was about middle-aged when I came along, and my first memories of her, I have no recollection of her as a younger woman. She was same as my father. My recollections of both of them begin when they were up around 40 years old. And my mother was always one who, she kept a spotless house, just as spotless as could be, considering the type of work that all of the men folks were doing, and coming in with all the dirty clothes on that we always did. And an excellent cook. She was just, and she backed Father in everything he did. She was she was just a very capable farm wife, if you want to put it that way. She had grown up on a ranch in southern Utah, and she and my father went, shortly after they were married, moved up into the Hinckley Delta Abraham area, and had begun their life as farmers. And when she was younger, she used to go out and work in the fields with my father when they were first getting started. And she could ride a horse just as good as anybody. And we always had 2 or 3 riding horses in our corrals, along with our work teams. And she was a typical frontier woman. She had many hardships, and as they all did, and she was just as tough as she had to be to make things go. She was a real partner for my father. But by the time that I can recall, why, she and Father were in good enough financial condition that and had developed the farms and the home and everything to the point where she spent all of her time at home around the house. And she was Relief Society president for a while and had various jobs in the church. And but when Father became bishop, why then she spent all of her time just supporting him and seeing to it that, and going with him to his various meetings and seeing to it that he made it to his various meetings. And one thing I recall about my mother that almost invariably brings tears to my eyes is when I was around 8 years old, and that's about 7 years old, we had a flu epidemic came through all over the United States, and it hit our little town particularly hard. Everyone was in bed with the flu, except my father was able to stay on his feet, and he took care of 2 neighbor families and our family for about 2 weeks, all by himself, did all the chores and took care of us all. We were all down in bed, and then he was able to, after one of the neighbor men got back on his feet a little bit, why then my father went to bed, and I was particularly sick, particularly ill at that time, and they didn't think that I was going to make it. But as I recall, my 2 oldest sisters and my oldest brother, Catherine, Pauline, and Pauline was the oldest, Pauline, Catherine, and Keith, all died during this epidemic. One of them died one day, and an hour later, the next day, another one died, and 1 hour later, the next day, another one died. And I can recall just as vividly as if it just had happened yesterday. 3 white-top buggies coming out of our lane, going to the graveyard, and all 3 of them, one right behind the other one, and there was frost all over the fence and the trees, that the fence wires must have been at least 1 inch to 1.5 inches thick with frost, and there was about 4 or 5 inches of snow on the ground. The ground was so hard, my father later told me that they had to use dynamite to make the grave, and they made one grave, buried all 3 of them side by side in one grave. My mother was down at the time, and my younger brother Clayton and myself, and my sister Leah was also convalescing, and my father and them moved my mother's bed to the front room window, and put my brother Clayton and myself there with her, and we were all propped up where we could look out the window, and Mother had an arm around each of us, and I'll never forget how the pain and the suffering that she was on her face at the time that those 3 buggies went down the lane. And she was squeezing Clayton and I so hard that I could hardly stand it, but I took it because I could see what pain she was in. But as I said before, my mother was as tough as she had to be. She was a good old pioneer stock, and she stood up under that. And she and my father were able to go on and rear the other 4 boys and daughter that they still had left. In looking back over my school days, I had a lot of fun in sports and in school, but at the same time I still was able to keep my grades at a high level. And I've said that I'm one of the few college graduates that never graduated from high school. We never had a graduation the year that I supposedly graduated. 2 weeks before school let out, we were all called in and said that school was over for the year because the school district had run out of money. As I've mentioned before, this was during the Depression, and the teachers had taught just as long as they could teach without any paychecks. And we had a general assembly of everyone in the school, and I was one of the top in the class, and I was preparing a speech for graduation. And I gave the speech as well as I had it prepared to this General Assembly, and that was our graduation. We got our diplomas later on in the summer when they got a little more money and could afford to give us diplomas. I went on to college at Cedar City, Utah, the Branch Agricultural College, and I was on a scholastic scholarship and was active in athletics. And then the next year went on to Dixie College, and where they had given me a job down there that would pay all my expenses, and that was primarily for athletics. But I was able to graduate from Arizona State Teachers College as one of the top ones in my class. And my first job I had was it has a terrific title, but wasn't too much of a job. But the spring that I graduated from college, I got a job with Arizona Properties of the Southwest Properties of U.S. Public Utilities. And since I had studied accounting, my job was as assistant auditor was to check out the power companies in northern Arizona, make up the reports and send them into Amarillo to the Southwest Properties offices. that job lasted me for a little over 3 months. Having been outdoors so much of my life, that time sitting over a desk was just more than I could hardly stand. Every evening I was ready to go, and I was playing baseball and for the town of Flagstaff, and I could hardly wait to get out on the baseball diamond to get some activity. And I always thought that each day that desk got wider, the stack of papers got higher, the air got staler, and my secretary, who was not very good looking, not very beautiful in the first place, seemed to get a little homelier. And I shouldn't say that about her. She was a terrific secretary. She was very competent and a real nice girl, but I wasn't cut out for inside work. I just had all my life had been outside. So that fall, I had been offered a job as teaching commercial subjects and coaching at Round Valley High School at Springerville, Eager area of Arizona. And so that fall, I went there to teach commercial subjects and coach. I stayed there for 3 years, and I did take my basketball team on the 3rd year I was there. Was the first team that had ever gone from that little school to the state tournament. We won the first night and lost the second in the state tournament. And to this day, I only know one other team that's ever come out of there that went to the state tournament. And that was 3 of the most enjoyable years of my life. We were right in the mountains, in the White Mountains of Arizona. Good fishing, good hunting, and the students that I was teaching, I could relate to them because they were farm kids and ranch kids. And that's the type of life that I really knew and really enjoyed. And as a result, why, I really enjoyed the work that I did out there. I was offered the job to teach as head of the commercial department in Winslow High School. So I moved to Winslow my 4th year of teaching, and I taught there for 2 years. And it was, and the second summer that I was there, I knew the superintendent of the railroad, and he asked me what I was doing for the summer, and offered me a job on the railroad for the summer. So I went braking as a brakeman on the railroad for the summer, and I liked the work so well that I stayed with it, and that's what I did for the rest of my life up until my retirement, and which is going to be in August of this year. And it was while I was teaching school in Winslow High School, the second year that I was teaching there, was when I met the girl that later became my wife. She was a resident of Winslow, had grown up in Winslow, and her father was a jeweler in the town and had been mayor and was on the city council for years and years, and very prominent family in Winslow. And I taught here in Winslow my first year without ever having met her. She was off to the University of Arizona going to college, and she'd come home for holidays. I was teaching in Winslow and working here, and I would go home for holidays. As a result, I never met her until in the middle of my second year. I went to a fireman policeman ball at the old Arcadia Hall, and needless to say, I was there with another girl, and as well, it was between dances that I saw, I was talking to one of my friends, and I saw Patricia Black. Everyone called her Patsy, and a name which he detests to this day. And I got to watching her. She danced by the next dance, and I asked this friend who this girl was, and he told me who she was, and he says, "Haven't you ever met her?" And I says, "No, never have." He said, "Well, we'll all be together at the end of this dance, and I'll introduce you." And he introduced me to Pat, and I asked her for a dance. In those days, you just kept a record of your dances. It wasn't a formal dance. You just asked whoever you wanted to dance with, and the girl kept the record of the dances. And I asked her for a dance, and she gave me number 14. And I, smart aleck like, I says, "Young lady, I asked you for a dance tonight, not tomorrow night." And she says, "Well, I'm sorry, but that's the dance you'll have to have, or none at all." And she put me in my place in a hurry. And about 3 dances later, I saw her waiting for a dance.